coming up. It was written in under 10 minutes. Today's songwriting virtuoso had this landmark track ready to go before his bandmates woke up for breakfast. They were staying in a haunted 18th century mansion at the time. This icon and his band, they were out to write the album of their lives. And they did. When this album and this song launched, they darted to number one. But then the accusations started to fly. Was this song a ripoff of another iconic track? It's an allegation the duo strongly denied. However, they did admit that it was heavily influenced by a completely different song. But despite its origins, this anthem was destined to become an all-time standard. It's going to be a long, long time before we hear anything like this one again. The story is coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey, music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you ever owned a jean jacket with band patches or pins all over it, you're gonna dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe below right now. Click the red button, click the bell so you know when our stuff's coming out. We also have a Patreon. When you sign up for that, that actually helps us to remain a daily channel. We are a self-funded channel. Any bit helps us to get more interviews and more content. And we also have our merch below. So it's time for another edition of our series, The New Standards. This is a show that takes an in-depth look into songs that transcend genre, decade, and fads, songs that are monumental touchstones in our culture and within our society. Today's episode is from Elton John's 1972 album, Honkey Chateau. We're blasting into the stratosphere with Rocket Man. I think it's going to be a long, long time. That's the actual name of it, a parenthesis song, if you will. Back in the early 70s, Sir Elton John was on a frenzied pace for sure. Between April 1970 and November 1971, Elton released 3 studio albums, which included his self-titled sophomore set, Tumbleweed Connection, and Madman Across the Water. 3 incredible albums. Plus, he also had a live album and a film score. During this time, Elton's single Your Song became his first bona fide hit, another standard. That reached number 7 in the UK and number 8 in the US.
Everybody, this is your song.
2 more tracks, Friends and Leave On, they broke into the Billboard Top 40, and Elton John's iconic Tiny Dancer shockingly missed the Top 40 by just 1 spot.
Hold me closer, Tiny Dancer.
But as Elton flipped the calendar to January 1972, there was still no time to relax. The promise of massive commercial success was calling from over the horizon. Working with celebrated lyricist Bernie Taupin, who's got a brand new book out, Elton prepared for his 5th studio album, Honkey Chateau. Also around this time, he legally changed his given name of Reginald Kenneth Dwight to Elton Hercules John. Said Elton, it was like slipping into a Superman costume. I'd grown fed up with people saying, this is Elton John, but his real name is Reginald Kenneth Dwight. Reg is the unhappy part of my life, and I can't bear people calling me Reg, end of quote. The cast of musicians that were supporting Superman for Honkey Chateau wasn't the typical array of studio musicians. Rather, Elton went with touring bandmates, bassist Dee Murray and drummer Nigel Olsson, along with guitarist Davy Johnstone, who had played on Madman Across the Water. Other musicians would also come and go as needed. Now, the name Honkey Chateau, that was an affectionate reference to where the album was created. Most of you probably know this, but it was an 18th century French mansion called the Chateau d'Hérouville. Getting out of the UK for a tax break. It's actually the first studio album Elton recorded outside of Great Britain. Producer Gus Dudgeon, he had suggested the unconventional recording space, and it was an enticing option for him. It provided both lodging and luxury. This grandiose estate, it boasted 57 rooms scattered over 3 wings. The team could sleep there, they could work any and all hours necessary, and they could relax in style, when the moment called for. Although some of the group would find it harder to relax than others. Reportedly, the chateau was haunted by the spirits of poet George Sand and composer Friedrich Chopin. Elton's entourage actually had several supernatural encounters during their stay. Taupin recounted that the manor had a very strange vibe about it. Davy Johnstone said that people were having ghostly run-ins almost daily. In total, Elton and his bandmates would spend 3 weeks at the Chateau. The work, it came fast and it flowed efficiently. Coming into the proceedings with just 2 songs in the works, Elton would reportedly write another 9 songs in a matter of a couple of days. Likewise, Bernie Taupin, he was also at the top of his game. Inspired by his surroundings, he kept the pages coming to Elton. He worked late into the night. Bernie would bash out his lyrics on his typewriter and then have his wife Maxine place them on Elton's piano that was in the dining room. The next morning, Elton would wake up before everybody else. He would wander into the dining room and he would just look over Bernie's lyrics and he'd eat breakfast. A supernatural force all his own, the melodies, they flowed spontaneously from his fingers. He would often finish his compositions before the rest of the band even woke up to join him.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
It's unbelievable, really, you think about it. In fact, on the first day, newcomer Davy Johnstone, he was convinced Elton was pulling an elaborate prank on him. 3 songs. Elton had finished 3 songs before the band turned up for breakfast. It seemed impossible, but it was no prank. Elton was that good. As Elton recalled, the first morning we were there, I had 3 done by the time the band drifted downstairs looking for something to eat. Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, Amy, and Rocket Man.
While Mona Lisa's and Mad Hatters, a lady called Amy. The touchdown brings me round again to find I'm not the man.
Now, zeroing in on Rocket Man, Elton had barely begun to look over Bernie's lyrics before his hands hit the keys. Alternating between a sequence of chords at GM9 and C9, he finished this melody in like 8 or 9 minutes. Unbelievable. Once, Davy was convinced that this was all real, he just picked up his guitar and asked Elton to play Rocket Man again. According to Elton, he didn't add a solo or really do anything that a regular lead guitar player might do. Instead, he just played these odd and lonely notes that drifted around and away from the melody. Elton loved it. He called the connection he had with his band at that time almost telepathic. Intuitively, everyone knew exactly what each song needed without being told. Said Elton about it, it felt fantastic. Sitting together in the Chateau's dining room, hearing a song take shape around us, trying ideas and knowing straight away they were the right ideas.
Place to raise your kids.
Now, the other songs for the album, just like Rocket Man, they were also very powerful. And by the end of their stay, everybody was thrilled with what they had accomplished, especially Elton. Now, during their final dinner at the Chateau, Elton announced that he was giving his bandmates royalties on the future sales of Honkey Chateau. This was something that was unheard of at the time. Honkey Chateau, that was Elton's first album to reach the top of the Billboard 200. It stayed on the US chart for over a year. In the UK, Honkey Chateau fell just 1 spot short of the summit. It went to number 2. Elsewhere in the world, it went to number 8 in Norway, number 5 in Italy, went to number 4 in Australia, number 3 in Canada, and it went to number 1 in Spain. Now, as we continue to break down Rocket Man, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses that I always wear. I'm telling you, you got to go retro with Zenni's latest frames. You can choose the style, the color, the shape. You can pull a Buddy Holly, a Bo Diddley, even an Elton John. They have every look that you can imagine. Just click on our info button right up here to get yours today, up to 80% off regular retail price. Now, surprisingly, only 2 singles would be released from the album. There was Honkey Cat and Rocket Man. I think it's going to be a long, long time.
Get back, Honkey Cat, living in the city, ain't nowhere inside.
Actually, there was a third potential single, Hercules, but it never saw the light of day. Elton didn't think that it would perform as well as its 2 predecessors. So let's get into Rocket Man. I talked a little about the song's composition, from Elton's perspective, but let me give you some insight into Bernie's contributions. The song actually originated with him. He wrote the lyrics. Well, sort of. Although Bernie wouldn't finalize Rocket Man on his typewriter until the night before, giving it to Elton. The idea actually started about a week earlier while he was still in England. As he explained, he was on his way to visit his parents up in the north of England, and the entire first part of the song, it just came together in his head. She packed my bags last night pre-flight.
She packed my bags last night pre-flight.
0 hour, 9 a.m., and I'm going to be high as a kite by then.
And I'm gonna be high.
That whole stanza, it was circling around Bernie's brain for like 2 hours while he was driving. But because it was a very rural area, there was nowhere that he could stop to write it down. So he just kept repeating it in his head. Again, this was before cell phones, so he had to just keep going so that he'd remember it. The minute Bernie arrived at his parents' place, he just burst through the door. He said, "Nobody talk to me. I got to write this down." And he quickly wrote it before he'd forget.
As a kite by then.
But the origins of the song actually extend further back than that. Thanks in part to the 60s space race, outer space, very popular subject by the time Taupin penned Rocket Man. I mean, the Byrds, the Stones, the Beatles, Steve Miller Band, Harry Nilsson, so many others. They all use space imagery in their songs and their song titles. All the sci-fi books were coming out as well, and the magazines, comic books. Notably, that list also included David Bowie's Interstellar classic, songs like Space Oddity and Starman.
There's a starman waiting in the sky.
Launched in 1969, Space Oddity, we've talked about it before, is reputed to have had a huge influence on Elton. And a lot of people back in the day called Rocket Man a David Bowie ripoff. It's actually an allegation that both Elton and Bernie strongly denied and still do.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Said Bernie about it, "A lot of people think that we wrote it in the wake of David Bowie's Space Oddity. I can put that to rest immediately, though, because when I was younger, I didn't really listen to traditional radio that much. So I wasn't really that familiar with that particular song," end of quote. Now, that being said, it's worth noting that both Rocket Man and Space Oddity were produced by Gus Dudgeon, just a few years apart. Obviously, both songs are similar in subject matter. It's a big subject matter, though. According to Bernie, Rocket Man's real inspiration actually came from the psychedelic folk group Pearls Before Swine. They'd written and released a song by the same name on their 1970 album. It was called The Use of Ashes.
Ship becoming ashes with a rocket man inside.
However, the chain of inspiration doesn't end there. Both Rocket Man writers Tom Rapp and Bernie Taupin were influenced by Ray Bradbury, specifically his 1951 collection of science fiction stories. It was called The Illustrated Man. One of those stories was called The Rocket Man. Taupin described the idea of the story saying that in the future, being an astronaut would almost become as routine as being a cab driver or a bus driver. Now, for Bernie, it was a fascinating thought here.
Mars ain't the kind of place to raise your kids.
Although the two songs are interconnected, there are thematic differences. Rapp's song, he takes the viewpoint of a mother and her child who wonder about their missing Rocket Man husband and father. Bernie, on the other hand, he writes from the perspective of a man who is setting off for Mars, and it describes his feelings of isolation and sadness from being separated from his loved ones so far out in space. Beautiful lyrics. "I miss the earth so much. I miss my wife.
I miss the earth so much. I miss my wife.
It's lonely out in space on such a timeless flight."
Such a timeless flight.
When Rocket Man was all done, it exceeded everybody's expectations. I mean, the whole team was conscious that they had created a song that they felt had an exceptional destiny. Released to coincide with the launch of Apollo 16 on April 16, 1972. A lot of people don't realize that.
In fact, it's cold as hell.
Rocket Man, it flew at least as high as NASA's latest mission. It reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100, went to number 11 on the US Cashbox chart.
If you did.
In reality, this was the first real Elton John phenomenon that started everything. There was Your Song, but this is one that internationally went to number 18 in Germany, number 13 in Australia, number 11 in New Zealand, number 8 in Canada, number 6 in Ireland, and it went to number 2 in the UK. So big all over. Rocket Man's success had a massive impact on Elton's psyche, gave him the confidence and a belief that he could sustain a career in music. He called it his first really huge single. In his words, Your Song had been a hit, but Rocket Man was a big hit. Further, Elton said, we'd stumbled onto a different kind of commerciality. And his success, it changed our audience. Screaming girls started appearing in the front rows and outside the stage door, tearfully clinging onto the car as we tried to get away. Since then, Elton's audience, it would only continue to grow, generation upon generation. And Rocket Man, it's grown as well, saturating the airwaves for decades, all over classic rock radio.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
It's also been all over pop culture. Rocket Man has been featured in a long, long list of movies and TV shows and commercials and covers. As far as media placements go, just for a few, you can catch Rocket Man in The Greatest American Hero, The Rock, K-Pax, 6 Feet Under, Numbers, My Name is Earl, Family Guy.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
Eureka, Cold Case, Kingsman, The Golden Circle. Sherlock Gnomes, Big Bang Theory, Californication.
Sorry, my phone.
What is that? Is that Rocket Man?
Lip Sync Battle, Battle of the Sexes, The Goldbergs. There's also, of course, the Elton John biopic titled Rocket Man, one word. The 2019 film stars Taron Egerton, who sings his way through Elton's lineup of jukebox hits. That includes Rocket Man, of course. It's featured in a scene where Elton goes from an overdose to playing Dodger Stadium to blasting off into the stratosphere in a matter of just minutes. In terms of covers, a lot of artists have given Rocket Man a go. Neil Diamond, Garth Brooks, Tori Amos.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
Melissa Etheridge, Styx, Jason Mraz.
Long, long time to touchdown brings me round again to find.
Slash with Miles Kennedy and the Conspirators.
Long, long time to touchdown brings me round again to find.
Jim Blossom, Sister Hazel, Fight for Fighting. Rob Thomas has done it. Coldplay, Fastball, Daughtry, William Shatner.
Such a time.
As well as the Rocket Man himself teaming up with the Piano Man, Billy Joel. I think I counted these guys have done it over 175 times. Then there's actually a really good cover by Kate Bush. In 1991, she recorded her own version for the John Taupin tribute album, 2 Rooms. Great album. Said Kate about it, from the age of 11, Elton John was my biggest hero. Loved his music, had all his albums, and I hoped one day I'd play piano like him. When I was asked to be involved in this project, it was like being asked, would you like to fulfill a dream? End of quote. Actually, Elton and Bernie, they gave Kate Bush her choice of what song to cover for the record, and instinctively she chose Rocket Man. Given complete creative control over the track, she wanted to make it really different from the original and gave it a bit of a reggae vibe. The song was released as a single. It reached number 12 in the UK, and it went to number 11 on the US Alternative Airplay chart. Of course, Rocket Man, it was only the beginning of superstardom for one Elton John. He followed with the song's success with 2 more albums recorded at the Chateau d'Aéroville. Don't Shoot Me, I'm Only the Piano Player, and of course, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. In fact, Rocket Man and Honkey Chateau really laid the groundwork for Elton John's highly successful commercial run into the mid-70s. Honkey Chateau was the first of 7 straight albums to certify platinum or multi-platinum by the RIAA. Not many have done that. The hits just kept coming.
We were hopping and bopping to the crocodile rock. Well, Saturday night's alright.
Aside from 6 studio offerings, that list also included 1974 Elton John's greatest hits. It's sold about 17 million copies. The man is on fire. He was on fire, he still is. Of course, since then, Elton, he hasn't slowed down. He's put together monumental career. It spawned 31 studio albums, 10 soundtrack albums, 16 compilations, and 5 live albums as well. Many more projects. It was Rocket Man really that opened the door to all this success, though. One of the greatest songs in Elton's catalog of elite tracks. Rocket Man is tallied, I think, somewhere in 1.3 billion range.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
There's no doubt that this song made Elton John a household name and deservedly became the nickname for this musical legend as well. Rocket Man, it's an absolute new standard, a song that has earned a place in the pop pantheon of the greatest songs of all time. I've always felt that there's a melancholy to this song, something you can't quite put your finger on. It's a magical song that reminds us of what once was possible in mainstream pop music. Elton and Bernie, the cosmic songtellers.
And I think it's gonna be a long, long time.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Leave us a comment about Elton John and Rocket Man. What are your memories of this song? What do you think about the first time you heard it? The melancholy I talk about at the end that you can't really put your finger on. Do you know what I'm talking about there? I'll elaborate in the comments. You elaborate as well. What do you think about this song? What do you think about Elton and Bernie, 2 of the greatest ever? Let's have a great discussion and celebrate this man, both men. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe below. We'd love to have you. We're always doing this every single day we jump in the time machine. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.